All right, today we're going to unpack the story of someone who, and this is no exaggeration, completely reshaped our world, Steve Jobs. But we're not just going to list his greatest hits. No, we're going to dig into the weird, seemingly random experiences that built his revolutionary way of thinking. So let's just jump right in with a question that sounds kind of nuts, right? How on earth did a calligraphy class that a college dropout took for fun end up changing technology forever? The answer to that question really gets to the core of his entire philosophy. How all these little disconnected moments, these dots, can connect in hindsight to change everything. You see, to really get inside the mind of Steve Jobs, you have to go way back to the beginning, back to the very unconventional ingredients that made him who he was. And it's funny, his story doesn't start with a computer chip. It starts with a deeply personal promise. From the moment he was born, his life was defined by this tension. On one side, you have his biological parents, who were university students and had one condition. Their son had to be adopted by a college-educated family. But on the other side were Paul and Clara Jobs, a mechanic and an accountant. They could only complete the adoption after they signed a piece of paper promising they would send Steve to college. And the great irony is that this very promise set him on a path that led him about as far away from a traditional degree as you can get. And that path really started in the family garage. His dad, Paul, was a mechanic, and he taught Steve a lesson that became the bedrock of his entire career. A true craftsman doesn't use a cheap piece of wood for the back of a cabinet, even if no one is ever going to see it. This idea, this obsession with perfection in every detail, even the hidden ones, that was baked into him from the very beginning. So when he finally did go to college to make good on that promise, he dropped out after just one semester. He felt it was a total waste of his parents' life savings. But he didn't actually leave. He just hung around, sleeping on floors and dropping in on classes that looked interesting, like calligraphy. Then he took off to India to find himself, came back, and worked at Atara for a bit. Looking at this timeline, you can see these are just random dots on a map. There's no clear path to a future in technology. Okay, so all of these scattered bohemian life experiences were about to collide with some serious technical genius, and it was going to spark a revolution right back where it all started, in that same family garage. And this slide, this is the dynamic duo. Apple was basically born from these two totally opposite forces that just fit together perfectly. You had Steve Wozniak, Woz, this quiet, brilliant guy who could build just about anything for the sheer joy of it. And then you had Steve Jobs, the intense, charismatic visionary who saw how to take that genius and turned it into something that could actually change the world. And they literally started in the Jobs family garage. I mean, Woz built the first Apple computer just to show it off to his buddies at the local computer club. It was Jobs who said, "Hey, we can sell this." And to get the money to start, Jobs sold his prized VW van, and Woz sold his favorite scientific calculator. They were all in, driven by this crazy mission to make computers personal. And this is the absolute key. From day one, Jobs wasn't selling a box of circuits. He was selling an experience. While every other company was talking about megahertz and RAM, he was focused on the feeling, the connection between a person and their technology. He believed a computer could be beautiful, an intuitive tool that anyone could use. But, and with a story like this, there's always a but. That same insane passion had a really dark side, and his uncompromising vision would eventually lead to one of the most famous stories of corporate exile we've ever seen. At the heart of how he managed people was this thing they famously called his reality distortion field. It was this crazy mix of charm, charisma, and just sheer force of will that literally bent reality to his vision. He could tell an engineer to do something they knew was impossible, like, say, shaving 10 seconds off the max boot time, and because he believed it so completely, they'd go back and somehow they'd do it. And he applied that intensity to everything. Remember that lesson from his dad about the cabinet? Well, this is it, cranked up to 11. He drove the Macintosh team absolutely bonkers, insisting that the internal motherboard, a part no customer would ever see, had to be laid out beautifully. To him, it had to be a work of art, inside and out. But you just can't push people that hard forever without consequences. His style created a ton of friction, and after a big power struggle with the CEO he himself had hired, John Sculley, the board took sides, and in 1985, Steve Jobs was fired, kicked out of his own company. Now, for most people, that would be the end of the story. But for Jobs, this supposed failure was actually an incredibly creative time. He started a new company, Next, where he developed the advanced operating system that would one day become the soul of every Mac. And then he bought a little graphics company from George Lucas and called it Pixar. And in doing that, he didn't just invest, he helped reinvent the entire movie industry. And all of this set the stage for the ultimate irony. By the late 90s, Apple was circling the drain, weeks away from bankruptcy. So in a desperate Hail Mary, the company turned to the one person who could possibly save it, the founder they had fired years earlier. So Apple bought Next, mainly for its operating system. And as part of the deal, they got Steve Jobs back. His return kicked off what's probably the greatest corporate turnaround in history. His first move? He took a flamethrower to the product line, cutting it down to just a few key products so the company could focus on doing a handful of things perfectly. And then he just started unleashing a string of hits, one after another. And these products didn't just save Apple, they completely blew up and remade entire global industries. First up was the iMac. In a sea of boring, beige boxes, the iMac was colorful, fun, and personal. It was the product that shouted to the world that design and the feeling a computer gives you mattered just as much as what was inside. Next up, the iPod. Now, it wasn't the first MP3 player, but all the others were clunky and complicated. The iPod was simple, it was beautiful, and it just worked. With the iTunes Store, it completely changed how we find, buy, and listen to music forever. Then came 2007 and the iPhone. This thing completely redefined what a phone could even be. It was a phone, an iPod, and an internet device all in one. It didn't just change the phone industry, it literally launched the entire app economy that we all live in today. And just when you thought he was done, he came out with the iPad. A lot of people scratched their heads at first, right? But he saw this space between a smartphone and a laptop, and he just created a whole new category of computing out of thin air. So when you step back and look at this whole crazy story, what's the big takeaway? Well, his true legacy isn't just in the gadgets themselves. It's in the set of core principles, this different way of thinking that created them. And this is where all those early dots finally connect. That random calligraphy class, that's why the Mac had beautiful fonts. That lesson on craftsmanship from his dad, that's why Apple products feel so well made. That search for enlightenment in India, that's where his obsession with simplicity came from. He proved that technology by itself isn't enough. You have to marry it with art, with the humanities, to create something that, well, that makes your heart sing. Which leaves us with one final and kind of tough question. We know Jobs' methods could be harsh. He was famously difficult to work for. So in today's world where we rightly value teamwork, collaboration, and a positive work environment, is that model, the singular, brilliant, but difficult visionary, is it still relevant? Or have we figured out a better, maybe more humane way to create that kind of world-changing innovation?